Racist woman destroyed the gown, assuming it was just a black server. Her billionaire spouse witnessed it, and the crimson wine splashed across the ivory dress like blood on pristine snow. Eleanor Crestwood observed her handiwork with malicious glee as the young server frantically tried to blot the liquid from her attire. "Oops," Eleanor said with feigned innocence, her smile displaying flawless teeth and a corrupt soul. "What a shame that people like you don't know how to navigate properly in refined settings." The Boston Annual Philanthropy Gala gathered the East Coast. Aristocracy at one of the city's most exclusive venues. Austrian crystals dangled from the ceiling. Exotic orchids adorned each table. And the subtle melody of a string quartet provided the perfect backdrop for high society's duplicity. Maya Johnson was only 24 years old and never imagined that taking an extra serving job would place her at the heart of a racial tempest that would transform everything. An MBA candidate at Harvard, she needed the additional income to support her family and fund her final semester. Her natural hair was neatly styled in an elegant bun, and she carried trays with the poise of someone accustomed to balancing heavy burdens. Eleanor Crestwood, conversely, was the epitome of a woman who viewed charity events as her personal stage. Married to real estate tycoon Edward Crestwood, she enjoyed the privileges of being born wealthy and marrying even wealthier. Her existence was an endless cycle of fundraising luncheons, spa retreats, and shopping expeditions that cost more than most families' yearly earnings. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Maya said with a composure that surprised even herself, kneeling to gather the fragments of the glass Eleanor had deliberately dropped. "I'll have it cleaned up immediately." "Don't bother," Eleanor replied loudly enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. "I suppose mishaps are frequent when you employ these types for significant occasions." The venom in Eleanor's words was so potent that several people paused their conversations to observe the scene. Maya felt the inquisitive stares, some uncomfortable, others clearly amused by the spectacle of public shaming. "Perhaps you should consider more competent staff for events of this stature," Eleanor continued, gesturing theatrically. "Individuals who instinctively grasp how to behave in sophisticated circles." What Eleanor didn't realize was that every toxic syllable was being absorbed by Maya with the resilience of someone who had endured far worse storms. Raised on the south side of Chicago by a single mother who juggled 3 jobs, Maya had learned early that true strength doesn't yell or react impulsively. It observes, learns, and strikes at the opportune moment. "Of course, ma'am," Maya replied, her voice retaining a tranquility that made Eleanor scowl, annoyed by the lack of emotional response. "I'll ensure everything is handled appropriately." As she headed to the kitchen with the debris, Maya subtly passed the head table, where a distinguished gray-haired man observed the entire incident with an inscrutable expression. Their eyes met briefly, and he nodded almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging something in her that others overlooked. Edward Crestwood had built a real estate empire on one fundamental principle: observe people when they believe no one is watching. At that moment, witnessing his wife publicly degrade a young worker, he saw 2 things clearly: Eleanor's true malevolent nature and the remarkable dignity of the server who maintained her composure under attack. In the kitchen, Maya finally allowed her hands to tremble slightly as she discarded the shards. Just 20 minutes earlier, she had been an ordinary student working to pay bills. Now she felt a burgeoning resolve, as if the universe was orchestrating something far grander than a mere evening's work. What no one in that opulent hall could have foreseen was that the unassuming server Eleanor had just held secrets that would transform the humiliation into a catalyst for a reckoning none would forget. If you've witnessed injustices like this and want to discover how a single night can upend the lives of those who believe they're inherently superior, subscribe to the channel to follow this story of justice that proves underestimating others can cost more than any fortune. Eleanor wasn't done. As Maya returned from the kitchen with fresh linens and a new uniform, the socialite had found her ideal audience, a group of elite women who hung on her every word as if she were unveiling cosmic truths. "Did you see that?" Eleanor gestured dramatically, her voice dripping with theatrical outrage. "The nerve of some people thinking they can infiltrate our gatherings." Clearly, someone failed to vet the staff properly. Beatrice Langley, heiress to a pharmaceutical dynasty, nodded enthusiastically. Darling, you're absolutely correct. Just yesterday, I had to fire a housekeeper for daring to question my cleaning standards. These people need to know their limits. Maya re-entered the main hall and immediately felt the weight of their gazes. Eleanor's circle had grown, and she could hear fragments of their spiteful conversation as she replaced glasses on a nearby table. Of course, she came back. She must need this job desperately. Imagine if it were one of our daughters forced to work like this. At least she knows her place and didn't dare talk back. Eleanor noticed Maya's presence and deliberately raised her voice. Anyway, ladies, I suppose we shouldn't be too harsh. Not everyone is fortunate enough to be born with privilege and a proper upbringing. What Eleanor didn't know was that Maya had graduated summa cum laude in economics from the University of Chicago before earning her spot at Harvard, that she had grown up translating legal documents for her mother, who cleaned offices at night to raise 3 children alone, that at 16 she was managing the family's finances and had turned their modest savings into a fund that paid for her 2 younger brothers' college education. Maya finished arranging the table in silence, but Beatrice decided to add her own contribution to the public degradation. Dear, she addressed Maya directly, her tone oozing condescension, you understand that staff should remain unobtrusive during events, don't you? Avoid attracting unnecessary attention. Yes, ma'am, Maya replied, maintaining respectful but steady eye contact. I understand perfectly. Something in Maya's tone made Beatrice frown. There was an eloquence, a presence that didn't align with the stereotype she expected. Eleanor noticed her friend's hesitation and decided to escalate the assault. Beatrice is right. Eleanor stood, approaching Maya with a vicious smile. Perhaps we should have a brief discussion about proper etiquette. You can read, can't you? The question was laced with calculated malice, loud enough for other tables to hear. An uneasy silence spread, and Maya felt dozens of eyes fixed on her, awaiting her response. Yes, ma'am. I read perfectly well, Maya replied, her voice steady. But a glint in her eyes suggested something more. Eleanor laughed, a sharp grating sound. Wonderful. Then perhaps you can read this for us. She picked up the event menu and thrust it toward Maya. So we can ensure the service staff understands exactly what's being served to distinguished guests. It was a deliberate and cruel attempt to humiliate. Eleanor wanted Maya to falter, stumble over the French terms on the menu, or refuse, giving her grounds to summon security. Edward Crestwood, observing from the head table, felt a surge of shame and fury. 23 years of marriage to Eleanor had revealed many distasteful aspects of her character, but he had never seen her so overtly vicious. Maya took the menu with steady hands. For a moment, she looked directly at Eleanor, allowing a faint smile to touch her lips. With pleasure, ma'am. To everyone's astonishment, Maya began reading the menu not only fluently, but with impeccable French pronunciation honed during a 2-year exchange program in line funded by an academic merit scholarship. Amuse-bouche d'agrac gelée au champagne, suivi par l'otage parmentier aux truffes noires du Périgord. Her voice was clear, confident with a French accent that would make Parisians envious. The words flowed like a melody, each syllable delivered with precision that revealed not only linguistic mastery but an intimate knowledge of French culinary culture. Eleanor's face drained of color as Maya continued, realizing her plan had spectacularly backfired. Beatrice stared, mouth agape, and the other women exchanged uneasy glances. Et pour terminer, l'îlot Grand Marnier accompagné d'une vanille de Madagascar, Maya finished, handing the menu back to Eleanor with a serene smile. I hope that was helpful, ma'am. The silence that followed was profound. Eleanor stood frozen, clutching the menu, utterly speechless for the first time that evening. It was undeniable that this unassuming server possessed a level of education and refinement that rivaled anyone in the room. Edward rose from the head table and approached the group slowly. His eyes met Maya's briefly, and she saw something in them, not pity, but respect and something akin to admiration. Eleanor, he said softly, his voice carrying a warning tone she recognized instantly. Perhaps it's time we focus on the true purpose of this evening. Philanthropy. Eleanor quickly regained her composure, realizing she had lost control of the situation. Of course, darling, she said, forcing a smile. just ensuring everyone understands proper protocols. Maya nodded respectfully and stepped away to resume her duties, but not before Beatrice whispered nervously to Eleanor, "Darling, perhaps we misjudged her." Eleanor gripped Beatrice's arm tightly. "We didn't misjudge anything," she hissed quietly. "Cheap tricks don't change who she really is. And before this night is over, I'll ensure everyone here knows that." What Eleanor couldn't have known was that Maya had spent the last 4 years meticulously documenting cases of racial bias in corporate settings for her MBA thesis, that she carried discrete recording devices and knew civil rights laws thoroughly, that every venomous word spoken that night was being carefully captured. While Eleanor plotted her next humiliation, Maya moved through the room, with the calm of someone holding a secret too potent to reveal prematurely. She had learned young that true strength doesn't shout. It observes, records, and acts at the most devastating moment. Edward returned to the head table, but couldn't take his eyes off the young woman his wife had just targeted. There was something about her that intrigued him deeply, a dignity, an intelligence that no uniform could conceal. What none of those present could have imagined was that the worker Eleanor tried to degrade was weeks away from becoming the youngest senior analyst at one of the nation's top consulting firms, and that every act of prejudice that night was building a case that would turn the humiliation into a catalyst for justice none would forget. Maya took refuge in the hotel's elegant restroom and finally allowed her hands to tremble, not from fear, but from the controlled adrenaline she knew from her days. Defending herself on Chicago streets, she discreetly checked a small digital recorder in her uniform pocket. Crystal clear. 23 minutes of racial slurs, overt discrimination, and intentional humiliation, all perfectly captured. For her MBA thesis on racial microaggressions in elite corporate settings, that night was a treasure trove. But, looking at her reflection in the gilded mirror, Maya realized this was bigger than academic research. "Maya," a soft voice called from the door. "Are you okay?" It was Edward Crestwood. Maya recognized the voice from his earlier remarks to the organizers. For a moment, she considered ignoring him, but something in his sincere tone prompted her to open the door. Edward stood alone in the hallway, hands clasped, betraying his unease. "I apologize for my wife's utterly deplorable behavior. There's no excuse for what I witnessed." Maya studied him carefully. 24 years of life had taught her to distinguish patronizing sympathy from genuine respect. In Edward's eyes, she saw something rare in men of his stature: authentic shame and anger directed at his own family. "Mr. Crestwood, I appreciate your concern, but you don't need to feel accountable for your wife's actions." "Of course I do," Edward replied firmly. 23 years of marriage have given me countless chances to address behavior like this, and I've failed miserably. "Maya, may I ask you a direct question?" She nodded, intrigued. "You're not really a server, are you?" Maya smiled for the first time that evening. "What makes you think that?" "Your French surpasses anyone's in that room, including professors from prestigious universities I know. Your demeanor, your eloquence, the way you maintain composure under attack." Edward paused. "Besides, I recognize brilliance when I see it." "I'm an MBA student at Harvard," Maya admitted. "I work as a server to support my family and complete my studies." Edward closed his eyes, processing the gravity of the situation. "Harvard? My God, Maya. Eleanor attacked a Harvard scholar out of sheer racial bias. Mr. Crestwood, this happens more often than you realize. Your wife merely voiced what many think silently. That doesn't make it acceptable," Edward said, his voice heavy with emotion that surprised Maya. "In fact, it makes it far worse." "May I ask what your focus is at Harvard?" "Analysis of systemic bias in corporate environments. I'm completing a thesis on how prejudice impacts professional opportunities for minorities." Edward was silent for a long moment. "Maya, may I make an unusual proposal?" 15 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby away from prying eyes. Edward had ordered 2 coffees and spoke in a hushed tone, as if conspiring. "My company, Crestwood Enterprises, has been grappling with serious diversity challenges. The board is pushing for genuine reform, not just superficial changes, especially after recent incidents." Maya listened intently, her academic instincts attuned to every nuance. I need someone with your expertise to conduct a comprehensive review of our hiring practices, promotions, and corporate culture. Someone who understands both the theory and reality of workplace discrimination. Mr. Crestwood, that's very generous. But it's not generosity. Maya, it's urgent necessity and self-interest. My company needs meaningful change, and you clearly have the knowledge and experience to drive it. Edward slid a business card across the table. External consulting, compensation aligned with market, rates for specialists of your caliber. You'd have full autonomy over methods and findings. Maya took the card, feeling the weight of the opportunity. Why are you doing this? Because I've spent 23 years living with a woman whose prejudices I quietly tolerated. Because I built a company that likely perpetuates the same systemic issues you study. And because, frankly, after what I saw tonight, I need to do something significant to address the harm my family causes. At that moment, Eleanor appeared in the lobby, searching for her husband. Seeing him with Maya, her expression morphed into barely concealed rage. "Edward, darling," she said, approaching with a forced smile. "I was looking for you." "What are you doing here with her?" "Eleanor, I'm offering Maya a consulting role at the company." The silence was thick with tension. Eleanor looked between her husband and Maya as if witnessing a betrayal. "You're joking, right?" She laughed, the sound high-pitched and nervous. "Edward, she's a server. She's a Harvard MBA candidate specializing in exactly the area our company needs help with." Eleanor paled. "Harvard?" "Yes, Eleanor. The woman you publicly humiliated is a highly qualified scholar working here to support her family." Maya observed the couple's dynamic with the clinical eye of a social behavior researcher. Eleanor was clearly stunned but already calculating how to salvage her reputation. "Well, Edward, even if that's true, we shouldn't make hasty decisions based on guilt. It's not guilt, Eleanor. It's recognition of competence and a critical business need." Eleanor turned to Maya for the first time since the initial attack. "Dear, I'm sure you understand that misunderstandings can occur at social events. Perhaps we should all forget tonight's minor disagreements." Eleanor's attempt to downplay her cruelty as a misunderstanding was transparent. Maya almost felt pity. Almost. "Miss Crestwood, there was no misunderstanding. Your remarks were very clear and deliberate." Eleanor forced another smile. "Of course, dear. But intelligent people like you surely understand that social contexts can be complex." "Actually," Maya replied calmly, "people with my academic background are precise about context and intent, especially when it involves documented racial bias." The word documented made Eleanor flinch slightly. "Documented?" Edward watched his wife's expression and understood immediately. "Eleanor, were you recorded?" Maya neither confirmed nor denied, but her silence spoke volumes. Eleanor began to grasp that the evening had become far more complicated than a simple humiliation. "Maya," Edward said, rising, "I await your response to the consulting offer. My assistant will contact you tomorrow with contract details." As the couple walked away, Maya overheard the start of a heated argument. Eleanor had realized too late that she had targeted the wrong person at the wrong time in the wrong way. Back in the restroom, Maya checked her recorder again and smiled. 23 minutes of explicit racial bias, followed by 15 minutes of desperate damage control. For her thesis, this was invaluable. For her career, it was an unexpected chance to drive real change at a major firm. But as she prepared to return to the dining hall and finish her shift, Maya felt something greater taking shape. The humiliation Eleanor had tried to inflict was becoming the foundation for something that would transform not only her life, but potentially an entire company's culture. What Eleanor didn't yet understand was that she had attacked not just a server, but a future expert on corporate bias who would soon have access to her husband's company's inner workings. The irony was exquisite. But Maya knew true justice would come through diligent work, systemic reform, and tangible outcomes. As she checked her reflection one last time, Maya realized that tonight marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of something entirely new. Eleanor had tried to put her in her place, unaware that she was propelling her into a position of influence that she would use to ensure others never endured the same degradation. The server was about to become the consultant. And when that happened, It would be Eleanor who would discover where she truly belonged, in a world where competence and character outweighed inherited privilege. 3 weeks later, Eleanor Crestwood woke with an uneasy feeling. Her phone showed 47 missed calls and hundreds of unread messages. Opening the first link Beatrice sent at 6 a.m., she felt the ground collapse beneath her. Businesswoman exposed for racial bias. Viral audio shocks. Boston elite, blared the Boston Herald headline. Below was a photo of her at the gala, her sneer immortalized. The 23-minute audio played on every major city radio station, her venomous words against Maya echoing clearly, accompanied by outraged commentary and witness accounts. Eleanor rushed downstairs, finding Edward in the kitchen with coffee and an expression she'd never seen. Cold, distant, final. "Edward, you have to do something," she cried, waving her phone. "This is a coordinated attack. That server is trying to ruin us." "Eleanor," Edward said calmly, not looking up from his newspaper. "That server is now our new corporate diversity consultant. And after hearing this audio, I understand why our company desperately needs her expertise." Eleanor froze. "What did you say?" "Maya started yesterday. Her first project is a thorough audit of our corporate culture, including all leadership roles." Edward finally met her gaze. "I trust you understand the implications." Eleanor's phone rang. It was Claudia Thornton, chair of the tennis club where Eleanor had been a member for 15 years. "Eleanor, the board met urgently this morning. Your membership is revoked effective immediately. The behavior in the audio is incompatible with our values." Before Eleanor could respond, the call ended. Notifications flooded her phone. The Ladies of Leisure WhatsApp group. Her social circle buzzed with messages about her. "I can't believe I associated with someone like that. My daughter attends Harvard. How many Mayas has she humiliated? James canceled our contract with Crestwood Enterprises. He doesn't want ties to toxic behavior." Eleanor opened Instagram and saw she'd lost 3,000 followers overnight. Comments on her photos were, "Brutal, disgusting person. Rich racist. Exposed. Hope she learned her lesson," Beatrice called, sobbing. "Eleanor, Charles canceled the contract for the office we were renovating. He said he won't work with toxic elements. I'm socially ruined." By now, Eleanor was hyperventilating. "Edward, make that audio disappear. Sue that woman. Do something." Edward stood slowly. "Eleanor, you created this. Every word came from you. There's nothing to sue except your own malice." The phone rang again. Dr. Lawrence, director of the Charitable Foundation, where Eleanor had been volunteer vice president for 8 years, spoke coldly. "Eleanor, the board voted unanimously to remove you from all roles. Discovering one of our leaders expressed such bias was shocking." Eleanor collapsed into a chair. In less than 24 hours, she'd lost her social status, friendships, charity roles, and community trust. "You know the irony?" Edward said, folding his newspaper. "Maya didn't even have to act. She just documented your true character and let your words speak for themselves." At that moment, Maya was at Crestwood Enterprises, being introduced to the HR team, dressed in a sharp suit with a briefcase full of reform proposals. She had gone from humiliated server to respected consultant in under a month. "Starting today," Edward announced at the department meeting, "Maya Johnson will lead our diversity and inclusion initiative. She has full authority to implement necessary changes." Employees greeted her with respectful curiosity. Many had heard the viral audio and understood her hiring's significance. Maya addressed the team with the same calm she'd maintained during the ordeal. "My goal isn't to punish, but to build an environment where everyone feels valued, regardless of background or appearance." Meanwhile, Eleanor remained confined in her home, watching her social life disintegrate online. Each notification brought fresh humiliation, canceled invitations, lost friendships, closed doors. Beatrice stopped answering her calls. Claudia Thornton posted a tennis club photo captioned, "Celebrating our true values of inclusion." Even her hairdresser canceled appointments, claiming to be fully booked. That night, Edward found Eleanor crying before the mirror. 23 years, he said simply. 23 years I lived with this person and pretended not to see. "Edward, please can we talk?" "Eleanor, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was you being exactly who you are. But this time, someone recorded it. He began packing his clothes. My lawyers will deliver divorce papers tomorrow. The house is yours, but our assets will be divided per the court's ruling. Eleanor stood, desperate. You can't be serious because of a server? Because of a Harvard scholar you attacked out of racial prejudice, Edward corrected. Because of 23 years of tolerating your cruelty. Because I realize my wife is the kind of person I've always despised. As Edward packed, Eleanor grasped the full extent of her loss, not just a marriage, but her entire social identity built on fragile privilege. The next morning, Maya woke in her apartment near Harvard, preparing for another day of transformative work. Her phone showed support messages from colleagues, professors, and strangers inspired by her story. What began as a night of extra work had become a chance to drive real, lasting change. While Eleanor faced the collapse of her former life, Maya strode confidently toward a future she would shape with skill, dignity, and the strength of turning humiliation into purpose. The server Eleanor tried to degrade was redefining what it meant to wield power for good. 6 months later, Maya was promoted to Director of Diversity at Crestwood Enterprises, implementing policies that became a national benchmark. Her private consulting firm grew rapidly, serving major corporations seeking genuine reform. Eleanor lived secluded in her empty mansion, divorced, friendless, exiled from her former circles. Her social media apologies only drew more criticism. Desperate attempts to restore her image failed. Edward married a civil rights attorney and donated half his fortune to scholarships for students like Maya. At Harvard's graduation, Maya addressed the crowd. Never let anyone define your worth based on prejudice. The best revenge is success. They never imagined possible. Eleanor's audio became a case study in discrimination courses. Her cruelty was now a lesson on prejudice's consequences. Maya transformed humiliation into purpose, building a legacy that would change lives for generations. If you believe no one should be judged by their skin color or origins, subscribe for more stories, proving that underestimating others can cost more than any fortune.